If you try to reach back right now, like into your memory, and capture the exact physical sensation of it, it almost always starts with the exact same sound.
Yeah, that very specific click.
Exactly. It's that heavy plastic click of the Nintendo DS, the
Yeah.
top screen just sort of snapping into
Right,
place.
that locking hinge. It's such a distinct noise.
It really is. And, it's late at night, the rest of the house is completely dark, and the silence is just
It's
absolute.
just completely quiet.
Yeah, you're under the covers, making this tiny, almost suffocatingly warm little tent of blankets because you're trying so hard to make sure the light doesn't leak out into the hallway and give you away.
Right, because you're definitely supposed to be asleep hours ago.
Oh, absolutely. And right there in your hands, glowing in the pitch black, are those two little backlit screens.
Mm.
And outside your actual window, maybe it's raining or maybe it's a clear summer night, but inside that tiny glowing rectangle, it's snowing.
Wow, yeah. It creates a very specific kind of isolation, doesn't it?
It really does. But it's not a lonely feeling.
No, not at all. Because you are physically alone in the dark, sure, but you're also holding a window to an entire universe. And it feels incredibly alive and exceptionally vast, but also surprisingly quiet. It's a very comforting seclusion.
It really is a comforting feeling. So welcome to the Decoding the Dark channel. Today we are taking a deep dive into a digital world that so many of us remember like a half-forgotten, beautiful dream.
A very peaceful dream.
Right. And whether you are currently drifting off to sleep, or just letting the stress of the day wash away, or maybe taking a quiet moment to yourself in a noisy world, we invite you to just get comfortable.
Just settle in and relax.
Exactly. Because we are heading back to the year 2007. We are going back to the Sinnoh region of Pokémon Diamond and Pearl.
And our mission for this deep dive, it isn't to look at the frenetic energy of competitive battling or anything like that.
No, definitely not.
Right. We aren't here to break down the math behind the game mechanics or talk about competitive tier lists. We really just want to bask in the pure nostalgia of the experience.
Just the atmosphere.
Exactly. We want to explore the ambient soundscapes, those lingering mysteries in the environment, and the incredibly rich lore that made this specific iteration of the franchise feel like a real place, a place you could actually visit.
Because whether you poured, hundreds of hours into these games 15 years ago, or you just appreciate the anatomy of beautifully crafted digital worlds, this deep dive is meant to be your quiet sanctuary.
A peaceful journey back.
Yeah. So let's start with the actual physical sensation of stepping into this world, because the transition from the Game Boy Advance era to the Nintendo DS, it was a tectonic shift in how we experienced digital spaces.
It was a massive leap.
It really was. We were leaving behind those entirely flat, two-dimensional sprite worlds, and Game Freak was suddenly working with a handheld system that had real processing power.
Right, and they used it to create what we now look back on as a sort of 2.5D aesthetic.
Yeah, 2.5D. That visual style is just fundamentally crucial to the atmosphere of Sinnoh, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Because the developers, well, they weren't quite ready to move into fully rotatable 3D environments like we see today. Or maybe they deliberately didn't want to.
Right, they wanted to keep it grounded.
Exactly. They wanted to keep that classic top-down bird's eye view that psychologically grounded the whole series. It felt familiar. But within that locked perspective, they began rendering the environments using actual 3D polygons.
Which changed everything.
It did. And what this gave the player was an unprecedented sense of verticality and depth. It was no longer just a flat sheet of paper. It was a diorama.
A diorama. That is the perfect way to describe it. I remember walking into Orberg City for the first time and seeing those massive wind vents and the coal conveyor belts.
Oh, yeah, the machinery.
Right. And they weren't just flat drawings painted onto the ground anymore. They had actual structure. The blades of the windmills actually spun, and they cast these dynamic shadows over the dirt.
Which was so impressive for the time.
It was. Or, when you approach Mount Coronet, this colossal mountain range that literally cleaves the entire region in half. You could actually feel the immense weight of it.
You really could.
Yeah, because you could see the distinct layers of rock towering above you as you approach the base. It made the world feel remarkably vast, even though you're playing on screens that were, only 3 inches wide?
Barely 3 inches, yeah. And beyond the geographical verticality, the DS hardware allowed for a much more immersive passage of time. They introduced this distinct, dynamic day and night cycle.
Which was so much more ambitious than anything they had done before.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just that they slapped a dark blue filter over the screen at 6 p.m. like in previous games. The entire color palette of the world actively shifted depending on the time of day on your system's internal clock.
The actual angle of the light seemed to change.
Yes, exactly. Think about Jubilife City. During the day, it's a bustling, bright, very standard RPG city. You know, the pavement is gray, the buildings are cheerful.
Very typical daytime video game town.
Right. But if you were playing at, say, 8 or 9 at night, Jubilife City completely transformed. The sky took on this incredibly warm, deep, almost bruised purple hue.
That purple sky is just burned into my memory.
And streetlights flickered on, casting actual pools of illumination on the pavement. And probably most importantly, the windows of the apartment buildings lit up with this soft, cozy yellow glow.
Which just changes the entire vibe.
It fundamentally changes the emotional resonance of the space. It isn't just a visual trick, you know. It tells a subconscious story.
Like people are actually living there.
Exactly. Those glowing windows imply that inside those polygonal buildings, people are home, they are having dinner, they are getting ready to go to sleep. It makes the digital world feel inhabited by lives outside of your own adventure.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
When you are wandering the wild routes at night and you see the glowing windows of a town in the distance, it provides a genuine feeling of relief and warmth. It's a digital hearth.
A digital hearth. I love that. And that visual warmth is anchored by an entirely new auditory language too, because if the visuals provided the diorama, the music gave it a soul.
The soundtrack is just unparalleled.
It really is. The music of the Sinnoh region is, for many of us, the absolute pinnacle of the franchise's history. Composers Go Ichino's and Hitomi Sato created something truly magical here.
They really did.
They deliberately shifted away from the heavy brass, the driving drums and the triumphant trumpets of the previous generation, and they leaned incredibly heavily into the grand piano.
Yes, Hitomi Sato in particular brought a very distinct, mellow, jazz-inspired style to the soundtrack, and the instrumentation choice of the grand piano is actually a brilliant piece of environmental design.
Really? How so?
Well, it comes down to psychoacoustics. If you think about the physical characteristics of a piano, the clear, resonant, sometimes sharp striking of the hammers against the strings, followed by that very clean decay. It perfectly conveys the sensation of cold, crisp air.
Oh wow, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, and Sinnoh is a northern region. It's a land defined by snow, frost, and high mountain peaks. So the piano music mirrors that climate beautifully. It literally sounds like winter feels.
It sounds like winter feels. That is so evocative. But it doesn't just sound cold, it also sounds deeply introspective.
Definitely.
When you start the game and you walk to Lake Verity, the theme that plays is this incredibly soft, sustained synth backed by a gentle, wandering piano melody.
It's so peaceful.
Right. It doesn't sound like the start of a bombastic, high-stakes adventure where you're going to save the world. It sounds like curiosity. It sounds like a child cautiously stepping into the woods behind their house for the very first time.
It evokes a profound sense of childlike wonder. And then, as the day turns to evening and eventually to night, the music in the towns shifts alongside the visual lighting.
Those night themes are just the best.
They really are. The upbeat daytime tracks slow their tempo, they loosen up. The nighttime theme for towns like Eterna City or Heart Home City morphs into this incredibly relaxing, brushed snare, upright bass kind of jazz.
Do you think the music was deliberately acting as a lullaby? Like, we talk about the isolation of playing on a tiny screen in the dark, and it feels to me like the composers knew exactly how their game was being consumed.
I think that's a very fair assessment.
It's almost as if the DS was whispering to us, rather than shouting for our attention, to compensate for the small hardware.
I believe it was highly intentional, yeah. The game isn't demanding your adrenaline during those night sections. It is inviting you to just sit back and exist within its borders.
Just to breathe for a minute.
Exactly. The nighttime jazz tracks are so subdued, so mellow, that they naturally lower your heart rate. It's music designed not just for a geographical location in a game, but for a specific state of mind. It actively asks you to slow down.
It really does. But while the night themes ask you to slow down, the daytime routes still carry a sense of momentum. And there is one track, one specific route, that holds one of the most fascinating musical coincidences in modern gaming history.
Ah, yes. Route 209.
Route 209. You leave Heart Home City, you step onto this route, and this driving, slightly melancholic pop rock piano melody kicks in. It is an unforgettable overworld track. But years after the game came out, players started noticing something deeply strange about the melody.
They did. The primary melody of Route 209 sounds almost completely identical to the chorus of the hit song 21 Guns by the punk rock band Green Day.
It's uncanny.
And when I say identical, I mean the chord progression and the vocal melody map onto the DS track with uncanny precision. You can sing the lyrics to 21 Guns directly over the Route 209 piano track, and it fits flawlessly.
If you listen to them side by side, it's actually jarring. And naturally, the internet did what the internet does. People immediately started formulating these wild conspiracies.
Well, of course they did.
Like, did Green Day play Pokemon? Did Game Freak somehow steal an unreleased demo from Green Day?
Right, but if we look at the actual timeline, the theories of plagiarism in either direction fall apart completely. Pokémon Diamond and Pearl were released in Japan in September 2006 and in North America in April 2007.
Okay, so 2006 and 2007.
Exactly. Green Day's album, 21st Century Breakdown, which features the song 21 Guns, wasn't released until May 2009. The song was written and recorded long after the game was already in the hands of millions of children worldwide.
Right. So Game Freak couldn't have copied Green Day because the song simply didn't exist yet.
It hadn't been written.
And the idea of Billy Joe Armstrong secretly playing his Nintendo DS in 2007, hearing Route 209, and deciding to base a multi-platinum rock anthem on an obscure Japanese video game track, it's an incredibly funny mental image.
It is pretty funny to picture.
But it just defies logic. The original chords and lyrics for the song weren't public, and Green Day certainly wasn't mining Nintendo cartridges for inspiration.
No, they weren't. Which leaves us with the only logical yet somehow most magical explanation. It is a pure cosmic musical coincidence.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. Two entirely different groups of artists, separated by oceans, cultures, and mediums, independently tapped into the exact same sequence of notes to evoke a very specific feeling of longing and momentum.
Just parallel thinking on a massive scale.
Exactly. Music is mathematical at its core, and sometimes the math just aligns perfectly to produce the exact same emotional result.
It just makes the track feel even more special, like that melody was just floating out there in the ether, waiting for people to pluck it out.
A shared frequency.
Yeah. But as much as the warm, driving melodies of the routes and the comforting glow of the city streets define Sinnoh, the region also has its deeply dark corners.
It definitely does.
Because the visual leap to 2.5D didn't just make the towns cozier, it also allowed the shadows to grow longer. And if we walk away from the safety of those jazz-filled streets into the deep, fog-covered canopy of the Eterna Forest, the upbeat music just fades away completely.
It drops out entirely.
Right. And it's replaced by this hollow, echoing sound of wind whipping through ancient trees. And waiting for us deep in the woods is an entirely different kind of atmosphere.
The Old Chateau.
The Old Chateau.
This location sits completely apart from the rest of the game's tone. Tucked away behind a row of trees that require a specific hidden move to cut down, the player eventually stumbles upon this derelict, abandoned mansion rotting away in the damp forest.
And the atmosphere shift is incredibly abrupt. You have the gym leader of the nearby town, Gardenia, standing outside the wrought iron gates.
And she's clearly terrified.
She is. She insists to you that she isn't scared of the rumors of ghosts, but she absolutely refuses to go inside, leaving you to investigate the mansion completely alone.
Which sets the stage perfectly.
It really does. And when you finally walk through those heavy wooden doors, the silence is just deafening. The background music is almost non-existent. It's just an eerie, dissonant tone.
What makes the Old Chateau a masterpiece of game design is its absolute reliance on environmental storytelling. In a genre that usually over-explains everything, there are no non-player characters to talk to here.
No one to explain the rules.
Right. There are no signs explaining the history of the house or journals left behind by former owners. You simply wander through the dusty entrance hall, into the long dining room, and up the creaking stairs to a series of abandoned bedrooms.
And that's when you see them. In the dining room, if you walk in at exactly the right moment, you will see the translucent, floating figure of an elderly butler.
Yes.
But here is the brilliant part. He doesn't notice you. He doesn't float toward you to trigger a battle or offer a quest. He simply glides smoothly across the floor and vanishes through the wall toward the kitchen.
And in one of the upstairs bedrooms, the ghost of a little girl appears. And again, she's completely oblivious to your presence. She simply floats out of the room and disappears.
Just right through the door.
Yeah. You cannot interact with them in any way. You cannot battle them. You cannot save them. They are just echoes of a past that the game completely refuses to explain to you. They are locked in a loop.
I've always thought of the Old Chateau as walking through a museum after hours. You know you aren't supposed to be there. The displays are meant to be observed, not touched.
That's a great analogy.
Doesn't the lack of interaction make it infinitely more unsettling? It subverts the entire premise of the game. Normally, the world revolves around the player. You are the hero.
Exactly.
But the ghosts in the chateau remind you that this world existed long before you arrived, and it doesn't care that you're here.
That is precisely why it works so well. Human imagination abhors a vacuum. Because the game never tells us who this butler and little girl were, or why the mansion was abandoned to rot in the forest, the player is forced to fill in the blanks.
And we always imagine the worst.
Right. Why is there a plate of poison-curing Old Chateau left untouched on a table? The game doesn't say. It leaves the mystery entirely up to the player's imagination. And that lack of exposition is what gives the chateau its power.
And the details they do provide are so meticulously unsettling. Like in one of the bedrooms, there is a portrait hanging on the wall. A painting of a man with glowing, malicious red eyes.
Oh, that painting is so creepy.
It is, and if you stand across the room, those eyes track your movement. They literally watch your sprite walk back and forth. But the moment you walk up to the wall, right in front of the painting to inspect it, the eyes just vanish.
It creates a deep sense of paranoia. And then there's the television set in another room, an old, thick, cathode ray tube TV. During the day, it's just a broken screen.
Nothing special.
Right. But if you visit the mansion at night, specifically between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m., the TV is suddenly broadcasting pure static, illuminating the dark room.
The text box that pops up when you interact with that TV is etched into the minds of everyone who played this. It just reads, the TV has an oddly malevolent feel. It's as if it is staring.
Yes, and this is where you encounter Rotom, a unique Pokémon made of electrical plasma that possesses household appliances.
Which is such a cool concept.
It really is. It's a brilliant piece of modern urban legend-style horror, seamlessly integrated into a game about catching monsters. The Old Chateau draws heavy inspiration from classic survival horror, a derelict mansion in the woods, a grand dining room, hidden secrets.
But without the cheap jump scares.
Exactly. It filters that horror through a gentle, ambient lens that relies entirely on mood rather than startling the player.
You leave that mansion with so many questions, and the game simply refuses to give you the answers. But, you know, while the ghosts of the Old Chateau are just local unexplained legends, the Sinnoh region is actually built on a foundation of myths that are far older.
Much, much older.
Right, far grander than a single haunted house. The quiet mysteries of the forest eventually give way to the sweeping cosmic mysteries of the universe itself.
To really understand the thematic depth of the Sinnoh region, you have to travel to Canalav City. It's a quiet port town, and sitting near the docks is the Canalav Library.
I love the library.
It is a multi-story building filled with rows and rows of bookshelves, and if you take the time to actually walk up to the shelves and interact with the texts, you uncover the profound, almost theological weight that the developers injected into this generation.
This is where the lore of the entire franchise fundamentally shifted, right?
It really did. Before this game, Pokémon were essentially just magical, highly capable animals. There were forces of nature, sure, you had birds of ice, dragons of the sea.
But they were still just creatures.
Right. But in the Canalav Library, we learn that the creatures in this specific region aren't just animals, they are the architects of reality. They're gods.
Which is such a massive escalation.
It's huge. The library archives contain a text referred to as the original story. The prose used in this digital book is so striking, so unlike anything else in the series.
What does it say?
It reads, "In the beginning, there was only a churning turmoil of chaos. At the heart of chaos, where all things became one, appeared an egg. Having tumbled from the vortex, the egg gave rise to the original one."
The original one being Arceus, right? Yeah, literal creator of the universe.
Precisely. The text continues. "From itself, two beings the original one did make. Time began to spin. Space began to expand. From itself again, three living things the original one did make. The two beings wished, and from them matter came to be. The three living things wished, and from them spirit came to be. The world created, the original one took to unyielding sleep."
Let's just pause and think about the sheer contrast here. As 10-year-old kids, we were out there picking berries. We were checking our digital pedometers to see how many steps we'd taken to hatch an egg.
Entering pets into beauty contests.
Yes. And while we were doing that, just a few towns over, there's a library text casually explaining the metaphysical birth of spirit and matter from a churning vortex of chaos.
It is a little funny when you put it like that.
The juxtaposition is almost hilarious, but it gives the world an incredible sense of gravity.
It introduces a staggering scale. Arceus creates Dialga, the deity of time, and Palkia, the deity of space. And then it creates the Lake Guardians Mesprit, Uxie, and Azelf, who represent human emotion, knowledge, and willpower.
It really elevated the stakes of this story.
Immensely. Because the central villain, Cyrus, isn't just a mob boss trying to steal rare animals for profit like the villains in the older games.
No, he's basically a nihilist.
Exactly. He wants to harness the literal fabric of time and space to unmake reality itself and rebuild a universe completely devoid of the human spirit.
It's so dark for a kid's game. And the library doesn't just contain grand cosmic creation myths. It has these quiet, almost melancholic folk stories that flesh out the ancient relationship between humanity and nature.
I love those folktales.
Me too. There's a story that reads, "There once were Pokemon that became very close to humans. There once were humans and Pokemon that ate together at the same table. It was a time when there existed no differences to distinguish the two."
That text hints at an incredibly deep ancient parody. It suggests as a pre-industrial paradise where the hierarchy of master and captured creature just didn't exist at all.
It was equals.
Right. And there's another folktale in those archives that is highly reminiscent of the Celtic myth of the Selkie. You know, the seal that sheds its skin to become human on land.
Oh, I know that one.
Well, the Sinnoh text reads, "There lived a Pokemon in a forest. In the forest, the Pokemon shed its hide to sleep as a human. Awakened, the human dons the Pokemon hide to roam villages."
It paints a picture of a world that is deeply magical, where the line between human and creature is constantly blurred. But, you know, it isn't all gentle, romantic folklore.
No, it definitely isn't.
There's also a text simply titled "A Horrific Myth," and it acts as a very stark, frightening, cautionary tale about those lake guardians we just mentioned.
Yes, the myth warns the reader of the psychological consequences of disrespecting the deities of spirit. It says, "Look not into the Pokemon's eyes. In but an instant, you'll have no recollection of who you are. Return home, but how? When there is nothing to remember."
That refers to Uxie, right? The bringer of knowledge.
Correct.
It goes on to say, "Dare not touch the Pokemon's body. In but 3 short days, all emotions will drain away." That's Mesprit. And finally, above all, harm not the Pokemon. In a scant 5 days, the offender will grow immobile in entirety.
And that is Azelf, the bringer of willpower. If you lose your will, you simply start moving. You become paralyzed by apathy.
It creates such a fascinating dichotomy. The game you are actively playing is bright, colorful, and built on the power of friendship and perseverance.
But the lore anchoring the world beneath the surface is ancient, unforgiving, and rooted in an almost cosmic horror of losing oneself.
It's terrifying, really.
It gave the region a sense of history that made exploring it feel like an act of archaeology. Catching these creatures felt transgressive, like you were tampering with forces far beyond your understanding.
We are about halfway through our journey tonight, and if you are finding this quiet walk through Sinnoh relaxing, we gently suggest that you like the video and subscribe to the Decoding the Dark channel for more calm, deep dives, just like this one.
It really helps us continue to make these peaceful explorations.
So getting back to the myths. While these creation stories were written plainly in a library's books for anyone to read, there was one piece of the mythos that was written directly into the game's code, but purposefully hidden from us.
A secret locked away behind invisible walls.
Exactly. We discussed Arceus, the original one, the deity that birthed the universe. Naturally, a being of that magnitude was fully programmed into the game for players to eventually encounter.
Right, the developers designed a highly specific ceremonial item called the Azure Flute.
The Azure Flute. Even the name of it sounds ethereal.
It does, and the intended in-game event was beautifully poetic. If a player had the Azure Flute in their inventory, they were supposed to travel to the Spear Pillar. That's the ruined ancient summit of Mount Coronet where reality was almost torn apart earlier in the story.
The very peak of the region.
Yes. Standing on a specific engraved tile, the player would be prompted to blow into the flute.
And when they did, a haunting, echoing melody would play. The air would shimmer, and a glowing crystalline staircase would literally descend from the heavens above the mountain, inviting the player to walk up into a realm called a Hall of Origin to face the creator of the universe.
It was fully coded, fully animated, and fully functional within the game's files.
but the Azure Flute was never officially released.
Yeah.
It was never distributed at a real-world event. It was never sent over the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection. It just sat locked inside the cartridge, gathering digital dust.
It's such a shame.
Years later, the game's director, Junichi Masuda, was asked in an interview why they never released it. His answer was that they thought the event would be too confusing for players to figure out.
Which, frankly, is a diplomatic answer that doesn't hold up to any real scrutiny.
Not at all.
The event required walking to the most prominent central landmark in the entire game, a place the story forces you to go to anyway, and simply pressing the A button when prompted. It wasn't some obscure arcane puzzle.
So what was the real reason?
The historical consensus, and the much more likely real reason for the flute's cancellation, involves the extreme fragility of the game's engine and a community phenomenon known as tweaking.
I want to talk about the tweaking glitch, because to me, this is where the game crosses from a structured, programmed experience into something akin to digital urban exploration.
It really was like breaking into an abandoned building.
It's like finding a loose floorboard in a house and discovering an entire subterranean cave system underneath.
Yeah.
How did tweaking actually break the game?
It comes down to the limitations of the DS hardware. The game loaded its maps in invisible squares or chunks as your character moved around the world.
Just loading pieces as you go.
Right. The processor could only hold so much environmental data in its active memory at once. If you used the bicycle, specifically the Mach bike, in its fastest gear, and rode very quickly in a precise zigzag pattern across the invisible grid lines where these map chunks met, you could overwhelm the game's rendering engine.
You were literally moving faster than the processor could draw the world in front of you.
Exactly. The CPU would just drop the loading request to maintain the game's frame rate. And suddenly, right in the middle of a bustling city, the textures of the ground, the trees, and the buildings would fail to load, leaving behind an endless expanse of pure black tiles.
Pure black nothingness.
This was known by the community as stepping into the void.
Stepping into the void felt like stepping out of the bounds of reality itself. It felt like exploring the backstage of a theater while the play was still going on.
That's a very evocative way to put it.
You were standing in pitch black nothingness. But if you take a step back, you are instantly back on the cobblestone street of the city. It was terrifying because you knew instinctively that you weren't supposed to be there. And saving your game here could permanently corrupt your cartridge.
It was very risky.
But it was also incredibly peaceful in a weird way.
And it wasn't just a visual glitch either. It had physical, exploitable properties. If you carefully navigated this invisible abyss, bypassing the programmed boundaries of the map, you could essentially walk around the walls of the world to reach islands that were supposed to be locked behind official Nintendo events.
The community effort to map the void was staggering. I remember players figuring out that if they entered the void in a specific town, they could use the Pokétch's pedometer app to count their steps.
Yes, the step counting was crucial.
They would post guides online. You would ride your bike in the pure darkness, 500 steps north, 2,000 steps east. You used the in-game compass. You navigated by counting pedals in the dark, praying the game wouldn't freeze.
It was an incredible act of communal puzzle solving in an era before everything could be instantly data-mooned and solved by algorithms.
It was all trial and error.
Exactly. And the reward for walking through the Black Sea was quietly slipping onto New Moon Island or Flower Paradise. There, waiting patiently in the code, were the mythical Pokémon Darkrai and Shaman. Players were bypassing the need for physical event tickets entirely.
And because players were essentially stealing Darkrai and Shaman from the void, Nintendo suddenly had a massive real-world marketing problem.
They absolutely did.
They had physical movie theater tickets tied to the release of these specific Pokémon. The incentive to buy a movie ticket was that you got the monster at the theater. But if kids had already caught them by riding their bikes through the void, they wouldn't buy the movie tickets.
Makes perfect business sense.
Right, so Nintendo abandoned the physical in-game items like the member card and the Oaks letter and just beamed the Pokemon directly to players instead. And by the time the Arceus movie came out later, they kept that direct download consistency, leaving the beautiful Azure Flute locked away forever.
It is a poignant story of unintended consequences, really. The sheer curiosity of the players, their willingness to wander into the dark, uncharted spaces of the code, ultimately changed how the creators interacted with them.
It's kind of beautiful, actually.
It is. The void represents the ultimate secret quest. One not designed by the developers, but discovered by the dreamers.
Discovered by the dreamers. That's lovely. And, escaping the endless black void, making it back to the safety of the programmed map, always came with a deep exhale of relief.
Just glad your save file wasn't corrupted.
Exactly. We return to the comforting, rhythmic passage of daily life in Sinnoh. Because if there is one thing this game excelled at above all others, it was making you feel like time was actually passing.
Yes. The DS hardware allowed the game to sync perfectly with your real-world clock and calendar. This concept wasn't entirely new to the franchise, but Sinnoh weaponized patience in a way that felt deeply organic.
The region felt incredibly lived in.
And the anchor for this daily rhythm was the device strapped to your character's wrist, which occupied the entire bottom screen of the DS at all times, the Pokétch.
The Pokémon Watch. The Pokétch was brilliant design because it was always there. You never had to pause the game or open a menu to use it.
It was seamless.
It started with just a simple digital clock, a chunky LCD-style font telling you the actual real-world time. But as you traveled, you collected up to 25 different applications for it.
Some of the apps were highly practical, like the dowsing machine. Instead of an item you had to select from your bag, the dowsing machine was a constant radar screen.
I use that one all the time.
You simply tapped the bottom screen with your stylus, and a little radar ring would ping outward from the center. If there was a hidden item buried in the snow or the sand nearby, a small dot would blink on the screen. It was a gentle, highly tactile way to interact with the environment.
And some apps were just wonderfully, delightfully mundane. Like there was a calculator, there was a memo pad where you could scribble notes with a stylus which immediately erased if you switched apps, making it almost entirely useless, but still fun.
Just little toys, really.
Yeah, there was even a coin toss app. Literally just an animation of a coin with a Magikarp on it flipping in the air. If you couldn't decide which route to take or which attack to use in battle, you could just tap the screen and let the flip of a virtual coin decide for you.
But the true magic of time in Sinnoh wasn't just watching the clock tick on the bottom screen. It was what the calendar unlocked in the overworld. The game trained you to look forward to specific days of the week.
It really did.
The most famous example is the gentle anticipation of Friday.
The Valley Windworks. Early in the game, you help clear out the villainous Team Galactic from a wind power facility. And after you do, the scientist there mentions offhandedly that sometimes on a specific day, a strange Pokémon drifts by on the wind.
If you return to that exact spot on a Friday, and only on a Friday, a single Drifloon, a ghost Pokémon resembling a purple balloon, would be floating peacefully outside the facility waiting for you.
Just bobbing there.
Right. And if you forgot to check, or if you couldn't play that day because of homework or chores, you simply had to wait another entire week.
And you couldn't even cheat the system. If you went into the DS hardware settings and manually changed the clock to Friday, the game's code would detect the manipulation.
They were very strict about that.
They were. It would punish you by locking all time-based events for a full 24 hours. You couldn't force the world to bend to your schedule. You had to adapt to its rhythm.
It taught patience.
I think these small, time-locked events trained us to appreciate the present moment, you know? It made the game feel like a living terrarium in our pockets.
It absolutely did. It taught the value of presence. It rewarded you simply for showing up. And the ultimate reward for simply being present on the right day was purely aesthetic.
Completely aesthetic.
It had no impact on your stats, it didn't help you in battle, and it didn't unlock a new area. It was just a moment of profound atmospheric beauty. I'm talking, of course, about Diamond Dust.
Diamond Dust. Even the name sounds peaceful. In the northernmost part of the region, Snowpoint City, it is always snowing. A heavy, constant white snowfall obscures the screen. But on very specific real-world dates, that weather pattern subtly changes.
If you booted up your game and traveled to Snowpoint City on January 12th, which happens to be the real-world birthday of the game's director, Junichi Masuda, the heavy snow is gone.
It's so beautiful.
Instead, the air is filled with glittering, sparkling, iridescent particles drifting slowly and gently toward the ground.
It's mesmerizing to watch. They added Diamond Dust to other dates later on, like Leap Day on February 29th or official franchise anniversaries.
That's just subtle detail.
But the sheer restraint of the developers to program a beautiful visual effect and then intentionally hide it on a handful of days out of the entire calendar year, just hoping a player might wander through the town and happen to notice it. It's artistry.
It really is.
It wasn't about catching monsters. It was about stopping to look at the snow.
It is the absolute epitome of the game's atmosphere. A quiet, unannounced gift to the player for simply being in the right place at the right time.
But all of these quiet moments, all the long walks through the glittering snow, the late-night training sessions under the purple skies of Jubilife, the terrifying detours into the Old Chateau, and the mathematical navigation of the Void, they were all leading the player toward a singular, inevitable goal.
Yes, the final destination.
Every player, no matter how much they dawdled or explored, eventually arrived at the exact same final, unforgettable challenge.
The summit of the journey, the Champions Room. For an entire generation of players, this is the ultimate shared nostalgic bond.
It is a great equalizer.
The quiet, profound anxiety of stepping onto that final elevator, watching the platform slowly rise, and walking into the grand chamber to face champion Cynthia.
And the tone shifts so dramatically here. You walk in, the dialogue ends, and this rapid, complex, incredibly fast-paced piano intro hits you like a physical force.
Her theme is just incredible.
Cynthia's theme is legendary. It tells you immediately, without a single word of text, that playtime is over.
Cynthia is widely considered the most formidable hurdle in the franchise's history, and the reason isn't just arbitrary difficulty. Her team was designed as a flawless tactical puzzle.
She didn't hold back.
She doesn't stick to a single elemental theme like the previous bosses. Her team is diverse, incredibly bulky, and designed specifically to cover each other's weaknesses.
Her lead Pokemon is Spiritomb, a ghost and dark type. And we have to remember the context of the mechanics back in 2007. The fairy type didn't exist yet.
Which was a huge problem for the player.
Which meant, mathematically, Spiritomb had absolutely zero elemental weaknesses. You couldn't hit it for super effective damage, you just had to slowly, painfully whittle it down while it constantly disrupted your strategy.
And if you managed to survive her Spiritomb, her Roserade, her Milotic, and her Lucario, you were inevitably faced with her ace, the dragon, Garchomp.
Garchomp. Just saying the name triggers a stress response in anyone who played this game.
It was overwhelmingly fast and staggeringly powerful. It carried the moves Dragon Rush and Earthquake, allowing it to essentially sweep through a player's entire team in a matter of turns if they weren't fully prepared.
It was devastating.
It forced you to use absolutely everything you had learned over the last 40 hours of gameplay.
Every quiet training session in the tall grass, every hidden item you meticulously found using the dowsing machine radar, every decision you made, it all culminated in surviving that Garchomp.
It really was a test of everything you'd done.
It's a rite of passage. If you meet someone who played Diamond and Pearl, you don't even need to explain the mechanics. You just say the word Garchomp, and you both share the exact same sigh of respectful exhaustion.
The relief of finally seeing its health bar drop to 0, of hearing the victory music and watching your team be recorded into the Hall of Fame as the credits roll over the piano melody, it felt like a genuine accomplishment.
It was the end of a long, cold, beautiful winter's journey.
Yeah.
And as we gently bring this journey to a close and bring you, the listener, back to the present moment, I think that is the beautiful dichotomy of Sinnoh.
It had so many layers.
It was a world that was simultaneously a cozy, snow-covered neighborhood where you could wait for a balloon on a Friday afternoon, and a grand, mythical universe where the gods of time and space slumbered in the libraries and the code.
It was a space designed to be lived in, just as much as it was designed to be conquered.
We want to warmly thank you for tuning in and sharing this peaceful journey with us on Decoding the Dark. We hope the memories of Sinnoh have brought you a sense of calm today.
We really hope you enjoyed it.
As a final soft reminder, if you enjoyed this atmospheric exploration, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more calm deep dives. We wish you a peaceful rest or a calm, gentle day ahead.
But before we officially sign off, as you drift away, I wanted to leave you with one last quiet thought to mull over.
Oh, what is it?
On Route 226, an entirely optional late-game area, there is a small house belonging to a character known only as the Meister. He asks to trade with you. If you accept, he trades you a Magikarp. But this Magikarp has a German nickname, Fappa.
Fappa.
Yes, Fappa. And when you receive Fappa, it subtly alters your Pokédex, quietly unlocking foreign language entries for the creatures you catch.
That's such a tiny, specific detail.
It was a tiny, easily missed interaction planted in 2007. But it was a hint. It was a promise that beyond the borders of the Sinnoh region and beyond the glowing screens of our Nintendo DS consoles, there's a vast, interconnected global world out there, just waiting for us to grow up and explore it.
So the next time you find yourself awake in the dark, remember that feeling of the glowing screens under the blankets. The world is vast, the snow is falling, and the music is just beginning to play.